Picture this. A young woman stands at a palace window, watching her father's carriage disappear into the Spanish mountains. She knows, with the certainty that only comes in moments of profound loss, that she will never see him again. Her small hands press against the cold glass as tears stream down her face. This isn't just any farewell. This is the moment Maria Teresa of Spain trades everything she has ever known for a crown that will become her beautiful prison. What you're about to hear is a story that Hollywood couldn't script better. A tale of love unrequited, of children lost, of a woman who possessed immense power, yet remained powerless over her own happiness. And before we dive deeper into this extraordinary life, hit that subscribe button, give this video a gentle like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The year is 1638, and autumn mist clings to the stone walls of El Escorial, that magnificent monastery palace rising from the Spanish countryside like a prayer carved in granite. Within its hallowed halls, a baby's cry pierces the September air. Maria Teresa enters the world as Spanish bells ring across the kingdom, announcing the birth of a Habsburg princess. But this is no fairy tale beginning. Her father, Philip IV, rules an empire so vast that the sun never sets upon it, from the silver mines of Peru to the spice islands of the Philippines. Yet for all his earthly power, he cannot protect his family from grief's relentless visits. Maria Theresa's mother, Elizabeth of France, cradles her newborn daughter knowing that death has already claimed too many of her babies. In these golden halls where courtiers whisper behind painted fans, infant mortality stalks even royalty. Imagine little Maria Teresa taking her first steps across marble floors where her siblings should have played. Instead, she walks alone, save for the rustle of her nurse's skirts and the distant echo of prayers offered for souls too young for this world. The palace corridors stretch endlessly, filled with portraits of dead relatives whose eyes seem to follow her as she passes. When she turns 6, death comes calling again. Her mother, Elizabeth, collapses after yet another miscarriage, her body finally surrendering to the cruel demands of dynasty building. The little princess watches from behind a tapestry as servants drape the palace in mourning black. She doesn't fully understand what has happened, only that the woman who sang Spanish lullabies will never return. 2 years later, her beloved brother, Balthazar Charles, her only surviving sibling, her companion in these echoing halls, falls ill. At just 16, the heir to the Spanish throne breathes his last. Maria Teresa, now 8 years old, suddenly finds herself next in line to rule the greatest empire the world has ever known. But she's just a little girl who wants her brother back. Philip IV, broken by loss but bound by duty, draws his surviving daughter close. In the private apartments of the palace, away from the rigid ceremonies of court, he becomes not just a king, but a father, desperate to prepare his child for the weight she must carry. Picture them together in his study, candlelight flickering across maps of continents she will never visit as he traces trade routes with his finger and speaks of responsibilities that stretch across oceans. The king's voice grows heavy as he explains the burden of empire. "Mija," he whispers, using the tender Spanish diminutive that no courtier will ever hear. "We are not born to be happy. We are born to serve God, Spain, and our people in that order." His weathered hands shake slightly as he points to territories on the map, each one bought with Spanish blood, each one requiring constant vigilance to maintain. She learns Latin from scholarly priests who marvel at her quick intelligence, studies the art of governance from ministers who bow low but speak frankly in her presence. Yet Philip ensures her education includes gentler pursuits too. She tends to her beloved pets, small dogs that follow her through palace corridors, exotic birds that sing in cages more golden than most people's homes. The great artist Velázquez paints her portrait, capturing that distinctive Habsburg profile softened by her French mother's features. In Velázquez's studio, surrounded by the scent of oil paints and turpentine, Maria Theresa finds brief moments of childhood joy. The master painter treats her with gentle respect due to royalty, but also with the warmth of a grandfather. "Hold still, pequeña princesa," he murmurs. "Posterity will judge us both by how well we capture this moment." But Philip IV is a practical man, ruling a struggling empire. He understands that a female heir, no matter how well prepared, could spark civil war. In 1649, when Maria Theresa is 11 and blossoming into young womanhood, her father makes a choice that will reshape her future. He marries his own 14-year-old niece, Mariana of Austria, in a union that makes even the incest-accustomed Habsburg court whisper. 2 years later, this child bride presents Philip with what Maria Theresa's mother could never provide: a surviving male heir. Baby Carlos enters the world sickly and strange, bearing all the physical marks of Habsburg inbreeding that Maria Theresa had miraculously escaped. His limbs are weak, his jaw protrudes unnaturally, and his eyes hold the vacant stare that will characterize his entire unfortunate life. Yet this pitiful infant displaces her from the succession. She is no longer the future Queen of Spain, but she has become something far more valuable in the deadly chess game of European politics. As she holds her new half-brother for the first time, feeling his fragile body trembling in her arms, Maria Theresa understands with startling clarity that her own fate is now sealed. Now we must step back and understand the world that shaped Maria Theresa's destiny. For over 150 years, France and Spain had torn at each other like wolves fighting over the same territory. Their armies had trampled through Italy, turning Renaissance cities into battlefields. Their navies had clashed in distant seas, from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean. This wasn't merely war, it was a generational blood feud that had consumed countless lives and drained both kingdoms' treasuries.
Spanish gold from the Americas funded endless campaigns, while French peasants groaned under taxes levied to pay for armies that marched across Europe's blood-soaked fields. Mothers in both nations had buried sons. Wives had become widows. Children had grown up never knowing their fathers' faces. The rivalry had roots in the very geography of Europe, with Spain controlling vast territories that seemed to encircle French ambitions. By 1659, Spain was exhausted. The empire that had once seemed invincible was cracking under the weight of constant warfare. Portugal had broken free after 60 years of Spanish rule, Catalonia had rebelled, and French armies pressed ever closer to Spain's heartland. The Spanish treasury, once filled with American silver, now echoed emptily. Something had to give, and that something would be Maria Theresa's freedom to choose her own path. The Treaty of the Pyrenees, signed in November 1659, would end this epic conflict through the most time-honored diplomatic solution: a marriage alliance. Maria Theresa, now 21, and in the full bloom of womanhood, would marry Louis XIV of France, the young king who had already begun to style himself as the Sun King. June 7, 1660. The Isle of Pheasants, a tiny piece of land, barely larger than a nobleman's garden, sits in the middle of the river Bidasoa between France and Spain. On this miniature stage, the fate of Europe will be decided. Maria Theresa arrives with a magnificent entourage. Hundreds of courtiers in silk and velvet, carriages laden with treasure chests of dowry gold, priests to bless this union that will supposedly heal centuries of wounds. Across the narrow water, another procession approaches. Louis XIV, just 5 days younger than his bride-to-be, cuts a striking figure. At 21, he already possesses the imperious bearing that will make him the most powerful monarch in Europe. When their eyes first meet on that small island, two young people, beautiful, privileged, and utterly trapped by circumstances beyond their control, size each other up like actors meeting before a performance that will last the rest of their lives. Louis sees a small, plump woman with fair skin and blonde hair, well within the beauty standards of the time. Her Habsburg features are softened by her French mother's blood, and she carries herself with dignity befitting her royal birth. Maria Theresa sees a young man already grown comfortable with absolute power. His every gesture suggests supreme self-confidence. In that first moment, she understands instinctively that she will never be more than a political necessity to this magnificent king. The formal ceremonies blur past in a whirlwind of Latin prayers and diplomatic pleasantries. But the moment that sears itself into Maria Theresa's memory comes afterward, as she prepares to cross the border into France forever. Her father, Philip IV, now graying and worn by decades of war and loss, takes her hands in his. His words are gentle but firm. "You must forget that you were an infanta of Spain, and remember only that you are now Queen of France." As his carriage disappears into the Spanish hills, Maria Theresa understands that she is truly alone now, bound to a man she barely knows, in a country that has been her homeland's enemy for longer than she has been alive. 2 days later, in the small French town of Saint-Jean-de-Luz, Maria Theresa becomes Queen of France. The ceremony is intimate by royal standards, yet even this modest celebration cannot hide the political calculation at its heart. She is marrying her double first cousin. Their mothers were sisters, their grandfathers were brothers. In the tangled web of European royalty, this union compounds generations of inbreeding. The journey to Paris unfolds like a royal progress from a storybook. Towns along the route compete to offer the most elaborate welcomes. Flower petals rain down from windows as their carriage passes. Children dressed as angels sing hymns of celebration. For a few golden weeks, it seems as though Maria Theresa might find happiness in this foreign kingdom. Paris receives its new queen with genuine enthusiasm on August 26, 1660. The people, exhausted by wars that have drained their purses and claimed their sons, see hope in this Spanish princess, who might finally bring peace. Maria Theresa, despite her natural shyness, plays her part beautifully. She waves from her golden carriage, her smile radiant, even as her heart pounds with nervousness. But the fairy tale atmosphere cannot survive the reality of court life. Louis XIV, for all his youth and charm, has already learned to compartmentalize his emotions. He can play the devoted husband in public while pursuing his pleasures in private. And his pleasures, Maria Theresa soon discovers, run to the sophisticated French ladies who populate his court. Women who speak his language perfectly, who understand his cultural references, who can match his wit in ways that his earnest Spanish wife cannot. Within months of her wedding, Maria Theresa discovers she is pregnant. In November 1661, she gives birth to a son, Louis, who will survive to adulthood and become the Grand Dauphin. For a brief shining moment, she has fulfilled her primary duty as queen, providing France with an heir. Louis XIV celebrates lavishly, and Maria Theresa believes she has secured her place in his affections. But tragedy, her old companion from childhood, finds her again in France. A daughter, Anna Elizabeth, arrives in November 1662, only to die 6 weeks later in December. The pattern repeats with heartbreaking precision. Another daughter, Maria Anne, born in November 1664, dead in December. A third daughter, Maria Teresa, lives until age 5 before tuberculosis claims her in 1672. 2 more sons, Philip Charles and Louis François, arrive and depart so quickly they barely have time to register as individuals rather than just fresh wounds in their mother's heart. Of 6 pregnancies, only the first produces a child that survives to adulthood. Each loss drives Maria Theresa deeper into herself, into her private prayers and her nostalgic memories of Spain. The compound tragedy of these deaths lies not just in their frequency, but in their likely cause. The generations of Habsburg inbreeding that produced both Maria Theresa and Louis XIV have created children too fragile for this world. Modern medicine might have saved some of them, but in the 17th century, their royal blood becomes a curse rather than a blessing. While Maria Theresa grieves her lost children, Louis XIV finds consolation elsewhere. His affairs become an open secret at court, then an open reality. He no longer bothers to hide his mistresses from his wife, no longer pretends that their marriage is anything more than a political arrangement that has served its purpose. The most painful betrayal comes in 1666, when Louis falls under the spell of Madame de Montespan, a woman whose wit and sophistication make Maria Theresa feel provincial by comparison. Françoise Athénaïs de Rochechouart, Marquis de Montespan, becomes not just Louis's mistress, but his unofficial co-ruler, the woman whose opinions shape policy, while Maria Theresa sits silently through court ceremonies. Maria Theresa's only close ally during these dark years is her mother-in-law, Anne of Austria, the widow of Louis XIII and Maria Theresa's Habsburg cousin. Anne understands the particular loneliness of being a foreign queen in France. Together, they speak Spanish, visit churches, perform charitable works that provide some small comfort to Maria Theresa's wounded spirit. When Anne dies in January 1666, Maria Theresa loses her last protector. The cruelest irony of Maria Theresa's position becomes clear in 1667, when Louis XIV declares war on Spain. The War of Devolution forces Maria Theresa to watch helplessly as her husband's armies attack her homeland. She finds herself caught between two loyalties, to the country of her birth and to the husband who has given her a crown but withheld his heart. In private audiences with Louis, she pleads for moderation, reminding him that every Spanish soldier who dies might be someone she knew as a child. Her interventions likely prevent even harsher terms when peace comes in 1668, but they cannot heal the fundamental rift between her public role and private anguish. Spain cedes territories in the Netherlands to France, and Maria Theresa must smile at the victory celebrations that mark her homeland's defeat. She has become a living symbol of Spain's submission to French power, a role that weighs on her soul even as it serves the cause of European peace. In her private apartments at Versailles, that magnificent palace Louis XIV is building as a monument to his own glory, Maria Theresa creates a small world that reminds her of home. She surrounds herself with Spanish ladies-in-waiting, speaks her native language, maintains the religious practices of her youth. Her beloved chocolate, imported at great expense from the Spanish colonies, provides comfort for sorrows that courtly etiquette forbids her to express publicly. She develops quirks that the French court finds endearing in their condescension. Her collection of small dogs follows her everywhere. She wears impossibly high heels to compensate for her short stature, though her clumsiness often results in undignified tumbles that provide gossip for weeks. She indulges her sweet tooth, despite the damage it does to her already poor teeth. Yet beneath these surface eccentricities lies a woman of genuine goodness. Her charitable works become legendary. She visits hospitals, provides dowries for poor girls, intervenes personally to help subjects who petition the crown for relief. In a court where everyone schemes for advantage, Maria Theresa remains refreshingly genuine, earning affection from common people even as she fails to inspire passion in her husband. By the summer of 1683, Maria Theresa has learned to find contentment in small things: her surviving son's achievements, her religious devotions, the quiet satisfaction of duties fulfilled, if not joyfully embraced. She is 44 years old, no longer young, but not yet elderly, when death comes calling with shocking swiftness. The abscess that develops in her armpit in July seems minor at first, the kind of ailment that royal physicians routinely treat. But infection spreads faster than anyone expects. The standard medical response of the era, bloodletting, may have accelerated rather than slowed her decline. Whether the physician's blade struck a major vessel or whether the procedure simply weakened an already failing body, the result is the same. On July 30th, 1683, Maria Theresa of Spain breathes her last in the Palace of Versailles. Her final words reveal the truth of her long exile. "Since I have been queen, I have only had one happy day." One can only imagine which day she meant. Perhaps her wedding, when hope still seemed possible, or the birth of her surviving son, when she briefly felt secure in Louis's affections. Louis XIV, free of last to marry whom he chooses, secretly weds Madame de Montillon, his longtime mistress and companion. But this union produces no legitimate heirs. When the Sun King finally dies in 1715 after a reign of 72 years, it is Maria Theresa's great-grandson who inherits the throne of France as Louis XV. More dramatically still, when Maria Theresa's half-brother, Carlos II, dies in 1700 without issue, his Habsburg blood too poisoned by inbreeding to produce viable children, it is Maria Theresa's grandson who becomes Philip V of Spain. The marriage alliance arranged in 1660 achieves its ultimate purpose 4 decades later. A French prince rules Spain, and the long enmity between the two kingdoms finally ends. In death, Maria Theresa accomplishes what she could never achieve in life. She becomes the bridge between two worlds, the mother of dynasties that will reshape European politics for generations to come. The lonely Spanish queen, who felt she had only one happy day in all her years on the French throne, becomes the ancestral link that unites the crowns of Europe's two greatest powers. Her story reminds us that history's most important figures are often those who suffer in silence, who sacrifice personal happiness for duties they never chose, who find ways to serve even when service brings no reward. Maria Theresa of Spain lived and died in Louis XIV's shadow, but her legacy illuminated the future long after the Sun King's light had faded. In the end, perhaps that is happiness enough, to know that love unrequited and dreams unfulfilled can still serve purposes greater than our own understanding, that even the loneliest queen can become the mother of ages yet to be born.